Chapter 13. The Secret of Oliver's Identity.
That night, a carriage arrived at Mr. Brownlow's house. Two men got out. They pulled another man out of the carriage, a tall, dark man. He protested, but they pushed him into the house. The two men worked for Mr. Brownlow. The tall, dark man was Monks. Mr. Brownlow waited for him inside the house.
Who are you? Why did you bring me here?
I want to talk to you about your brother.
Brother? I have no brother.
Listen to me. I was your father's friend. I know who you are. You call yourself Monks, but your real name is Edward Leaford. Your father's marriage to your mother was unhappy. After you were born, they separated. Some years later, he fell in love with a young woman. They wanted to go away together and marry, but your father suddenly died. The poor young woman was expecting a baby. She was alone and had no money. She went to the workhouse where the baby was born. The young woman's name was Agnes, and her baby was Oliver Twist, your half-brother.
Before he died, Oliver's father went to visit his friend, Mr. Brownlow. He gave him a picture of the woman he loved. Mr. Brownlow kept this picture. After his friend's death, he tried to find the young woman to help her. But it was impossible. She disappeared completely. It was a strange coincidence that 12 years later, Mr. Brownlow met Oliver and took him home. He saw that Oliver looked like the young woman in the picture, but he did not realize that Oliver was, in fact, the woman's son. Now Mr. Brownlow knew who Oliver was. And he also knew why Monks hated him. Their father was a rich man when he died. He left a will. Half of his money was for Monks. The other half was for his second child, who was not born at the time. But Monks and his mother wanted everything.
Your mother burned the will, and now you want to destroy Oliver.
You cannot prove that.
Mr. Grimwig came in.
Mr. Bumble is here, and there is good news from the police. They have found the murderer's dog. They will soon catch him, and Fagin too.
Your game is nearly over, Monks. But if you give Oliver his share of the money, I will not tell the police about you. Now, where is this man, Bumble?
Good evening, sir. And how is dear little Oliver?
Mr. Bumble, do you know this man?
This man? No. Well, perhaps I met him. But I didn't do anything. He threw the ring into the river.
All right. I accept your offer. Oliver can have his share. But you must say nothing to the police.
Chapter 14. The End.
Jacob's Island was a part of London, down by the River Thames. It was the darkest, dirtiest place in the whole city. The streets were narrow, the buildings were old and broken. Only the poorest people lived there, in terrible conditions. Most Londoners were afraid to enter Jacob's Island because it was a dangerous place. Criminals, thieves and murderers went there to hide in the abandoned houses. In one of those houses, there were two boys from Fagin's gang, Dodger and Toby. They hid in a room high up at the top of the house. Early that day, the police captured Fagin and the other members of the gang. They were now in prison. Only Bill Sykes was still free, but nobody knew where he was. Dodger and Toby were afraid. They sat and waited.
They'll hang Fagin. And Sykes too when they catch him. What's that noise?
Let me in.
Oh my God, it's Sykes!
Well, have you nothing to say? Where's Fagin?
In prison.
They heard a dog barking and a crowd of people outside.
It's your dog! The police followed him here.
What? Give me that rope. I'm going to climb down to the river.
Sykes climbed out onto the roof.
There he is! On the roof! There's the murderer! Look! He's tying a rope to the chimney!
Suddenly, Sykes shouted in terror.
The eyes again! I can see her eyes! I can see her eyes!
He fell, and the rope caught him by the neck. He was dead. Fagin was put on trial for all his crimes and condemned to death. The night before his execution, he sat alone in his prison cell. He was confused and afraid. In the darkness, strange thoughts passed through his mind. He remembered some of the terrible events of his life and the men who died because of him. In the early morning, the church bells rang. With the sound of each bell, he heard one word: death. The Dodger went to live in the country. He started an honest life.
I'm gonna be a farmer. I don't want to end my days like Fagin.
Monks went to live in America, but he soon spent all his money and died in prison. Mr. Bumble lost his job. He became so poor that he ended his days inside the same workhouse.
Look at me now. And to think I was once the manager here.
Oliver went to live with Mr. Brownlow, who was like a father to him. They moved to a house in the country, near Rose and Mrs. Maylie. Finally, Oliver was safe and surrounded by friends. Mr. Grimwig often came from London to visit them.
If that boy isn't happy, I'll eat my head.